Hello, this is International Professional Communication, and our focus on cultural rules for relationships. We're going to identify the signals that people from different cultures use to engage in business, working to understand the various ways that our cultures show respect, power and authority, and reward performance. We'll also discuss the influence of culture on business ethics. This is Chapter 7 in the Varner and Beamer text, and it highlights, again, respect for authority, structuring of messages, dress as a symbol of authority, power distance, tone, behavior. Note on page 260. Germans have a tendency to establish their authority by giving very clear, precise, and often blunt directions. They spell everything out. Nothing is left to chance. The language is precise. So as a result, in German businesses, managers have a remarkable degree of authority. And then Varner and Beamer contrast this, of course, with Japan, which they always have quite a few Japanese examples throughout their text. This particular chapter has quite a number of in-focus sections that I encourage you to spend some time with. Consider your own culture that you have been, I'm thinking of the target culture, of course, that you just completed the comparative analysis on. And I ask you to look at that culture through many of the questions and the areas of focus in terms of cultural rules for relationships. Here is the overview that is in the Canvas system. Again, Varner and Beamer, Chapter 7. But we also, I've constructed the course forum to be more of a more scenario driven and to examine a number of resources that businesses use and to draw on these as part of responding to this scenario. You will also be responding to the questions and direction from your discussion leaders. And at the very end of this recording, I'll talk just briefly about the documentation for translation project. Okay, let's think about this particular scenario. A businessman from the former Czechoslovakia, would be Czech Republic now, went to the United Arab Emirates to discuss a deal. The meeting with his counterpart was to take place in the person's home, as is apparently common. He was invited to dinner, decided to bring flowers, was sure that this woman would be pleased, the husband would appreciate this. He brought flowers, but in fact he was not even allowed to enter the house. In some Arab countries and other Muslim countries, the wife or wives have their own private quarters. I think of the place where my daughter, when she worked for a year in Morocco, lived, and it was very much this same house arrangement. Had to be, learned so much from the architectural layout of things and how it protected and was meant to show respect. There are quite a number of cultural dimensions, again, that are talked about in more detail in this chapter. You will see Varner and Beamer often refer to Hofstede. In this particular case, the resource Hofstede and Minkoff, and looking again at long and short-term orientation and new perspectives on it. This particular visual, pick out the flag, if you can, of the country that you perhaps studied. Perhaps your particular flag is not here, but where would your target country fall on the power distance index? Individualism versus collectivism, masculinity, femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long versus short term orientation. What are the cultural rules for establishing relationships in your target country? This is the week when you begin visiting with your partner from the University of Trieste in Italy. You might visit about what are the cultural rules for establishing relationships. What about respect for authority, power distance, assertiveness versus harmony, recognition of performance, hospitality, business ethics? Again, this is one of the resources for your work in the course forum, the Hofstede Center. And in this you can, it says please select a country in the drop-down menu and look at what you learn in terms of these 6 dimensions. I did so with Vietnam, a country I have not visited but would like to. And this is one of the visuals in terms of these dimensions. Now, I find it to be quite helpful when I do a comparison. So in this case, individualism versus collectivism. Definitely more of an individualistic culture here. We have less than the U.S. long-term orientation. And you may think, well, what about we have more indulgence? Again, you need to read in detail the descriptions of these various dimensions, both in the Varner and Beamer text and also using the Hofstede resource. A number of you mentioned the globe study in your comparative analysis papers, and thank you for doing so. So I pull out just a few visuals here, where as part of that globe study, in this particular case, they're identifying countries and where they map based on the dimensions of power distance and uncertainty avoidance. You can stop this video and look at this and locate your country. Another visual, in this particular case, they're using Schwartz's map of countries. Again, you can see some overlap with the dimensions, and then a couple of different ones here. But people, I have been working to map these dimensions, and we know that, of course, they only help us so far. And the importance, again, of identifying cultural metaphors and ways to think and interact with people from the other cultures to be able to better understand how to, in this case, approach international professional communication. This is yet another one of the visuals from the globe study. So let's look at a few of these in more detail. Power distance. And in your own words, explain this concept. Then think of where does my country fall along this power distance dimension, and what implications does it hold for me for conducting business? Think about the language of your country. Does it indicate power and authority? When I worked in Japan, I had to learn both the more formal language, and I had to learn, I worked with children, and in some cases in what was called a juku. It was a little school for children after school to try to get ahead of other children at school. I mean, to learn an additional skill, and in this particular case it was learning English. Okay, I had to learn a children's language in addition to a more formal language. Language clearly indicated power and authority. And what about the family and societal structure? Many of you have already talked about this dimension in your comparative analysis paper, but you maybe did not label it power distance. Quite a number of you talked about individualism versus collectivism. And again, notice in this case a mapping of those as well as power distance. Varner and Beamer also talk about assertiveness versus harmony. I will include this set of slides just as a set of slides with the resources for week 7 so that you can click on these 2 research studies. The first that identified root causes that would make employees of East Asian origin appear non-assertive. And this perception was actually a misperception of reservedness or modesty. It may, in turn, this be a lack of understanding of the roots of that culture coming from Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism. And it may not be evidence of a lack of leadership ability. It's just simply the cultural values coming through in these employees. And in this paper, it looked understanding different culture patterns and orientations between East and West. Again, I include it because the author compares high context, low context, individual collectivism, equality, hierarchy, and so on. So it just shows the application of these dimensions in a couple of studies. Recognition of performance. Here's a scenario. You're managing a global team that includes members from these 5 countries. How will you reward performance? Perhaps this is a scenario that you might choose to talk about a bit in the course forum as well. Hospitality. Perhaps your global team in your target country, but you've had some great success. How would you draft an invitation in celebration of honor? Would it be formal? Would it be more informal? Business ethics. And what is your country's approach to bribes, to gifts? What ethical situations keep a business person up at night for this country? Critical to think about, to talk about, to learn about for international professional communication. So I've provided quite a number of scenarios here. I look forward to seeing which ones you key in on the most in your discussions. I do have this one placed in the work page, for Canvas. And in this case, I say you've been assigned to develop a plan for helping your business to better understand cultural rules for establishing relationships. You have quite a bit of information between Varner and Beamer. We also have these 5 resource sites. Given your study thus far, suggest what your business should do in the short term and the long term. Now for your documentation for translation project, this is the week to share your visualization of your personal learning network. You'll do it, boom, right away on Monday. That's the targeted exchange day. Be sure to start to record detail and reflections as you begin to work on the second assignment in this course. We have included multiple recordings, and I believe there may even be a 4th one, but you have Professor Giuseppe Palumbo, just a wonderful overview of translation, something that we do not have very many modules on in our programs, so very important. I provide here an overview of the Transatlantic Pacific Partnership, that's TAP, and it's under the auspices of TAP that we are paired with the University of Trieste. And there actually are multiple sections, 5 sections, both 4 from the Writing Studies 3562 course and then this course. So 5 sections here paired with the students at the University of Trieste. And down here, the documentation for translation project is a video included on our Canvas site where I just give more detail about this assignment. I look forward to your discussions on cultural rules for establishing relationships. And this falls at a very good point in our course because you are working to establish a relationship with your partner at the University of Trieste. I look forward to your work.